Good afternoon, everybody. Looking forward to this conversation. I've got on with us today Barry Rogers. He's the Director of Operations for Exergy Energy. Good afternoon, Barry.
Afternoon.
So we're going to be talking about today the upcoming cost increases in the PJM markets and how to avoid those. So most of our listeners, they know PJM just vaguely, that it's something to do with my utility. Not a great understanding of what PJM does in the market, what their responsibilities are, and then also what a auction is and how they could impact them. So we're hoping to unpack that today. Barry, if you could give us, just a quick introduction to like your background and what gives you, inside baseball knowledge on auctions and things like that. And then what was the auction happened recently and the impact that it might have?
Sure. Yeah. Barry Rogers, I've been working in the energy industry for about 20 years. I started out as a power trader in the Western electric grid. It's a little bit different kind of market out there, works more off of a bilateral system. I then moved to an affiliate company we had in Texas, whereas Texas is more of a traditional trader market. It's what we call an independent system operator, ISO market, which just means it's a little more trader friendly. It works off of market clearing prices as opposed to sort of making bilateral deals in the West. I also then worked in PJM, managing assets out there. So for the most part, this was all asset-backed trading that we managed a portfolio of generation assets, and we would buy and sell the power generated for those assets. And enter into long-term trades. Things like capacity markets are a part of what's paid to power generators by loads. Now, ERCOT, Texas, that market is in what's called an energy-only market. That works a little bit differently. But I also worked in the PJM market, and that is a capacity market. And we'll go into a little more detail what that's about. Maybe it helps if I start by sort of sharing a screen so people can kind of visualize. Let me see if I can. I don't want to get people lost here just by blabbing too much. Let me know when you can see that.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So this is the U.S., how it's separated into regional transmission organizations, RTOs. I also mentioned ISOs. So ISO is more of that clearing market for power. You see that in California. This is ERCOT. This is Texas. Here's PJM. And this is the Mid-Continent System Operator, New York and New England. Those are really the ISO markets in the U.S. The way they function is power generators pretty much offer their power into the market at a set price. Now, depending on where you are, it can depend on how the price you're allowed to offer. ERCOT's an energy-only market. I can offer whatever price I want. In the capacity markets, in exchange for participating and getting capacity payments, I really have to offer my verifiable cost. PJM is that kind of market. There's a lot of variations in these. One other important thing to note here, the Western U.S., kind of if you were to go up this line right here across New Mexico and Colorado all the way up, that is one interconnection. All of these are electrically interconnected. The Eastern interconnection is this entire region here. And then Texas is its own thing. It is electrically disconnected from the rest of the U.S. I mean, we've done plenty of webinars on ERCOT and the volatility. ERCOT is a market built and designed around volatility. So a lot of times when you hear people talking about exploding power prices, it occurs there, and that's by design. The volatility you see in a region like PJM is more, it's in the capacity market, but as I said, in exchange for participating in this capacity market, you're offering in sort of your verifiable cost of things. So that tends to temper down on the energy volatility. And I know that's confusing. We'll go into more detail here. But if, starting with PJM, it originally stands for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland. It's come to encompass a variety of other states here. You can see West Virginia, Virginia. And then here it's actually Chicago. So the ComEd region of Chicago is part of PJM, despite kind of being an island within this mid-continent ISO. Like I said, these are all interconnected, but they work off of a different clearing market.
Yeah. So with PJM, there's more price stability, but it affects a larger region. So
Yeah, let's say there's two different components here. There's energy and there's capacity. And the
yep,
energy piece, so kind of your variable cost, your variable piece of generation, is subject to less volatility than a region like ERCOT, which is volatile by design. So the way that power generators are paid is not purely on the margin they make on the energy they generate, but this capacity piece that we're going to talk about is
yeah.
a big part of how a power generator makes money in a region like PJM.
So with PGM, the announcement that I think is getting everybody's attention, and there's been quite a few news articles and things come out about recently, is the capacity auction, and kind of the eye popping numbers from that. Could you go into what a capacity auction is, and then what kind of role that plays as far as to the customer?
Yeah, so the PJM ISO and other capacity markets rely on capacity as a means of what they call resource adequacy. So,
Hmm.
resource adequacy is just what is the ISO's ability to meet forecasted demand. So, this is for system planning. You can't say, oh crap, we're out of power. I need to build a power plant right now, right? You have to look out in the years and say, hey, here's where we forecast demand growth from population increase, manufacturing increase, commercial industrials, and what is that supply picture? What does the generation look like? What is the mix right now? Are we adding renewables? Are we retiring other assets? And with that balance is left over in PJM, you're looking for a reserve margin. It's like between 13-15%. I can't remember the exact number offhand, but the capacity market is designed to basically incentivize enough generation to be there to meet future demand. So it's a base payment that a lot of these generators get for their participation in the market. Covers a lot of your fixed costs, but really what it helps is develop new assets so that a few years from now, in some cases many more than that, because the development cycle can be quite long, those assets are there to meet demand.
Okay. So if I'm hearing it right, if I'm PJM and I look 10 years down the road, which is how far I really have to look, because if I saw a need for, extra power 10 years from now to get it built, I need to start putting those components in there now. So if I look out and I saw I need just throw a number out there, I need 1,000 gigawatts of power 10 years from now, and I look and I say, what we have today, factoring in all the different types of, coal or plants that are going to, be decommissioned and we're going to pull their power out. And I look at the additional growth of energy needs, and I say, I can see we need 1,000 gigawatts and we only have, 700 gigawatts of power. Then I need to put some kind of price mechanism out there to incentivize energy producers to produce more energy. Is that kind of a simplification of it?
Yeah, that's definitely hyperbolic in terms of size, but
Yeah.
and term. Like 10 years, you might look out 10 years to try to do some planning, but it's really that long a time horizon. It's a little more. We're really looking more like 3 years in
Mhm.
a lot of these auctions, and they've even got shorter. The auction that we're going to talk about, where the most recent spike in price occurred, is for the 25-26 delivery year. But it's all to say that you would sort of extrapolate that out and forecast many years of growth, because you need many years of development to meet that growth. And there's a big long interconnection queue of different projects, people wanting to pull large amounts of power off the system, and you have to be able to kind of balance that supply demand picture.
So what was the auction that happened recently, and how did that come in?
Yeah, this is the PJM base residual auction. So first of all, let me kind of highlight the PJM region a little more so people can see, here's the US map here within PJM. So it covers a variety of states, but within the states, and it's not even a whole state in a lot of cases, you have an individual utility. So a lot of what happens in these auctions can be isolated to even within these specific utility zones. It's all to
Mhm.
say that, just because you're a part of PJM doesn't mean it applies the same way to you. But anyway, this most recent auction, I'm going to kind of pull up the results here. It really blew up in price. Last year we were looking at something gosh, it was around like $30. I don't have the exact number right in front of me. $30 a megawatt day for capacity, and that blew up to almost 10 times that in this most recent auction. And it happened, and you can see it's a little bit deceptive in a lot of this chart, but it's been relatively low, flat for a number of years, and then
Yeah.
it's just kind of blowing up. So what
Giant.
caused it to really jump like that? It's a couple of things. So for one, I should start by mentioning PJM. It's the mid-Atlantic up into the Northeast. This is a densely populated region, but it also covers a lot of kind of the Midwest and the former really manufacturing hub of the United States, where a lot of that has been shifted overseas. So when it comes to PJM, we've actually seen load grow at much more stagnant, even declining rate. I think
Yeah.
their all-time peak was back in 2006. So you contrast this with a market like ERCOT, Texas, and you've seen more things moving into Texas. Manufacturing is different there. It's a lot from the energy industry, a lot of liquefied natural gas plants. So anyway, you've seen growth kind of been pretty steadily up in that region. PJM's been kind of flat. So two things going into this. I said supply and demand. Demand is really starting to pick up, and this isn't just isolated to PJM. This is kind of nationwide. If
Yeah.
you look at where electric demand comes from these days, it's from things like server farms and AI. If you look at the computing power required for AI relative to more traditional, if you're running a Google search that's just your basic Google search versus, say, an AI enabled search, you're talking about an exponential increase in power requirement for that, multiplied across the hundreds of millions of people, and you can imagine the demand that puts on the system. So these server farms, these GPUs, everything else, they're going into the system in very short order. It used to be you create a manufacturing facility, a factory or something, takes years to get online. Well, these things don't take nearly as long, and there are a lot of kind of boilerplate cookie cutter facilities. We work with some of these guys that they develop, so they can get them on the grid in short order, and they take a lot of demand. So that's the supply side. It's not necessarily the same way it worked historically, where population growth and more traditional manufacturing sort of led it on an upward trajectory, but at a slow pace. Now you're really seeing it move. That electrification is holding for things like I said, the server farms, cars. You're just seeing it happen kind of across the board and across the country. Now, on the opposite end of that, on the supply side, we are also seeing a lot of plants that are very long in the tooth. Coal's obviously got a bad PR for some time now. It is a dirty resource, and a lot of these coal plants, we're not really building many new coal plants. There haven't been a lot developed in the last like 10 years. And a lot of that has to do with just regulation. Environmental regulations have got pretty strict, and so that's made it cost prohibitive. Natural gas has actually got really cheap too. So now you have alternative sources that are cheaper and cleaner. But it's all to say that we have coal plants on the system that are 30, 40, 50 years old and still in operation. So these things have kind of been ready for retirement for some time. In a lot of cases, when pricing gets stagnant, you have companies operating coal resources and natural gas resources, and they're kind of cannibalizing each other. In a sense, they might do better if they retire these assets because this asset will make more money. So what you're seeing in PJM is about 6,000 megawatts of primarily coal that's going to retire over the next couple of years. And you couple that with the added demand, like I said, just the shift in demand that's occurring, nationwide, and there is an extreme need for more power. Now we have been building things like intermittent renewable resources, and that's helpful. You probably see more larger penetration of that in a place like ERCOT relative to PJM. The amount of wind in ERCOT is just insane. But you are seeing more of that coming in PJM too. But it's sort of a drop in the bucket at the moment, and we probably need to develop more traditional forms on top of that. Basically, this is the market saying we need new development. So
Yeah.
but somebody has to pay for that, and unfortunately, that is the load, the demand. The users end up paying for this. But this is the market sending the signal that we need new generation, and we need it soon.
Yeah, you mentioned like the manufacturing in the Midwest. There's been a lot of press about the state of Ohio
Yep.
winning, large semiconductor factories because we're trying to repatriate a lot of that manufacturing, and there's a lot of incentives there. So yeah, you see, especially that Columbus, Ohio area that's in that AEP territory of PJM.
Hmm.
And customers there are worried because these large manufacturers, they have large energy loads and they know that the demand charges are a big part of their bill. They haven't accounted in their, their projections. They haven't accounted for an exponential increase in their bill. So you mentioned how the auction, we went from that, $29, $30 megawatt hour up to, 270. How does that show up on the customer? Because you mentioned somebody's paying for it, and we all know who that is. That's the end user. So how does that show up on a customer, or where do they see that?
Yeah, so let me step back for just a second, because while that is like an exponential increase on the part of capacity,
Mm,
capacity is more historically, this is a bit of an oversimplification because this is going to vary region to region, but
yeah.
historically a smaller part of your bill, although it is on a par with, like, say, the transmission. And we call it, when we say transmission, we're really meaning the high voltage transmission. There's another component called distribution, and distribution is more like the low voltage transmission that's really taking it to the end use consumer.
Mhm.
But all of these components comprise often half or more of a bill. So
Yeah.
when you see something like the capacity take off and it doubles, it doesn't mean your whole bill, or this one went up by ninefold, but let's just say it did double. It doesn't mean your bill would double in cost necessarily, but that one component of your bill could go up quite
Yeah.
significantly, right? So the other thing is how it appears on your bill varies from region to region. And furthermore, a lot of people have third-party suppliers because the energy market's deregulated. So just because this is your utility provider, uh, sorry, I'm trying to click on it. Is it going there? All right. Just because this is your utility provider doesn't mean it's also your electricity supplier. So
Yeah.
it's all to say you see it come through in different ways, but rest assured you're paying for it, right?
Yeah.
Like no one's getting away from this. The market has to fill this gap with a lot of money. But let me see if I can pull up a sample client bill here. This is from the PSEG region in New Jersey, right, which is part of PJM. And I picked this one because it specifically pulls out some of the capacity. Uh, and this is an older bill, so you'll have to bear with me. The prices are a little bit stale, but right down. So let's just go through it a little bit. Up here, you can start to see some of your delivery. So, like I was saying, you have transmission and distribution costs. A lot of that's being billed up here. Here's your kilowatt hour usage on peak, your hour usage off peak. So that's volumetric on your entire bit of usage. Things like transmission and capacity bill off what's called a demand charge. So a demand charge is more an instantaneous measurement of usage, but that measurement is taken at a peak time. And so
Yeah.
this is to determine essentially your ratio share of things like transmission. So when this says annual demand, this is looking at what the peak usage here. It says highest measurement demand at any period in the current month. So that's the PSEG mechanism for which they take that measurement. Capacity is down here under the supply. That's billed the same way from a demand charge. So it's taking a measurement at a peak time and saying this is your ratio share. Now, like I said, this doesn't always appear at this part in your bill. A lot of times it's lumped into the price of the electricity because you went with a third party supplier and they sort of play games with how the transmission and capacity are factored in there.
Yeah.
Some people think they may have fixed it because you can, in a sense, when you go, please reach out to us or a professional when you get your supply contracts because they're very complicated. They really are. And they appear in a variety of different ways. But a lot of times that capacity and transmission charge is sort of put in the cost, in your usage cost. And a lot of people think they fixed it because there is a mechanism which says, we can kind of fix transmission capacity. But all of these contracts have sort of risk provisions that say when something like this happens, we got to be able to pass along that cost to the end
We
use
recoup it
consumer.
somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you think about a home builder, if you signed a contract to build a house and the price of lumber went up tenfold, they can't finish building that house for you or they'll be bankrupt. That's sort of what the supplier is going through, that they
Yeah.
can't pass this around at a fixed cost or they'll be bankrupt. So there is a mechanism, even if you think it's fixed in most cases, where they can pass it along. But
It's good.
anyway, it appears usually in some supply portion of the bill.
Yeah, it's you're paying for the charge somewhere or another. I had this conversation about health insurance with somebody the other day. And they're like, yeah, my health insurance is really cheap. Like, no, it's not. You're just paying a small portion of it. Your employer is paying 80% of it, but that's money that you would have gotten in your salary if you weren't paying for health insurance. So you're paying for it somewhere.
Yeah,
And with this, yeah, it's the same thing where that charge is in your bill somewhere, and it does benefit you to have somebody who's an expert look at it and kind of show you where that's coming from.
that's a great metaphor, Randall. I'm going to steal that one because I think in the healthcare industry, when you look at something like insurance, there's so many messy moving pieces there. Do you have a copay? Do you have, what's your deductible? Yada yada yada. Well, you can kind of think your power contract like that. It's a lot of these are, especially for large commercial industrial customers, they've been tailored to fit a certain need. Certain risk provisions have been removed. Certain line items have been jammed in elsewhere. Some costs have tried to be fixed while others kind of are variable. Yeah, so it's a lot of moving pieces for sure.
Yeah, we had a customer in the PJM territory, and we were walking through this with them, and pulling apart their billing, and the portion that they had allotted to this charge was, I think it was $4,000, and then after they put in the auction numbers, that jumped up to $38,000. So now this
Yeah.
customer is like, I I have to steal $34,000 from some other budget area next year to account for this. How in the world am I going to explain that up the chain? So
Right.
it is an impactful chain that's coming to people, and the sooner you get your head around it and really know what you're facing, the better. So with the impact that it's going to have, and significant, if somebody's a high energy user, and they've got a decent sized bill, it's going to change pretty significantly. So what are some ways that a customer can mitigate that?
Right. So that gets back to the measurement time I was talking about. So the great thing about capacity is you know when that measurement is going to occur. In PJM, we call this 5CP, or this is what PJM calls it. It's five coincidental peak. And it's basically looking at, for simplifying it, the 5 biggest days between June and September. It's going to look at a peak time, and during those peak times it's going to take a measurement, and it's going to say, here is your load ratio share for capacity, right?
Mhm.
At Exergy, our bread and butter is really about making backup generators and helping commercial industrial users kind of manage their energy costs. Well, when you have something like a backup generator, you can run your facility on that backup generator during these management times. And essentially, when they go out there and they say, okay, company ABC, what was your usage? It's going to look like basically zero because you were running on your generator instead of pulling off the grid. And that this isn't, you're not cheating the system. People, this is well publicized. People know this. You are actually helping the system in a lot of ways, because on a peak day, rather
Yeah,
than them having to build more generation, bigger,
you're
more
taking that
expensive
load
power
off.
plants, you're taking the load off. So taking the load
Yeah.
off, what we call demand response in a way, is sort of akin to power generation. So this very much is helping the grid when you do it. But anyway, since these measurement periods are largely forecastable, you look at, I can tell you actually right now, PJM has declared a hot weather alert, a maximum generation for today, because it's sort of late in the summer, but they're having a really hot day. So today could very well, they take that measurement, and you would see it coming, right? There would be kind of alerts. There's plenty of forecasting services. We do it, and you take them off. You take your load off. You put it on the generator. You make your measurement look like zero. There's some kind of D rates associated with that. I won't get into the details. You might not get it all the way to zero, but anyway, that's how you sort of can avoid these capacity charges. And I should say, this happens similarly with transmission, depending on your region. This
Yeah.
PSEG region charges about $160,000 a megawatt year for transmission, something like that. And
Yeah.
it works off of a similar mechanism where it's looking at these coincidental peaks. So when you forecast that, now they don't necessarily coincide with the PJM peaks or capacity, I should say that,
Right.
but similarly, we can forecast those, take the load off of the grid at those times, and avoid the demand charges for transmission as well.
And that is one of the benefits of, like the Exergy backup power as a service model, where instead of, just one big CapEx number on the front end to buy backup power and put it in place, I'm paying a monthly fee. And so when I look at that, if I'm on the bubble where I think I need backup power, but it's just like I'm not quite to the place where I can cost justify it. And then I look at the impact that backup power would have on my energy bills. Now all of a sudden it moves it into no-brainer territory, because I'm paying a monthly managed service fee for the backup power, but by leveraging that backup power when it's idle to protect myself, I'm lowering my energy costs pretty dramatically, and that can pay for my help pay for my backup power.
True. I'd even expand on that to say the grid is telling you reliability is going down with some forecasts like this,
Yeah,
right? In a
yeah,
certain way, they are. And you can even look at it, like if you look at what happened in Houston this year, it was kind of a disaster with the CenterPoint utility that, they had some hurricanes come through, they had some backup plans that failed. You're relying on more intermittent resources. The battery build out's just not there yet. We tend to think that technology improves everything over time, but in this case, we're kind of mixing in more flexible loads with more intermittent resources, and there's yet another evolution of technology that needs to occur to fill that gap. And
yeah.
what's going to happen is a loss of reliability until we get there. So things like backup generators not only help leverage against some of these programs or avoid costs, but it's also adding that reliability that the grid is very much telling you is in flux as we kind of progress into our next stage.
Yeah, and most of the people I talk to that are, behind the curtain in the energy industry, almost everybody agrees that things are going to have to get dramatically worse before we can fix it. Because just the cost of a real fix to the North American energy grid, the cost of not only time and energy and money, but the impact that it would have of actually going through the exercise is so large that until things get worse than they are today, there's not going to be the political will to act upon it. So we're going to see worse times coming, and as that comes, being a distributed energy resource or having the ability to power your own facility and enterprise with your own equipment is going to become not only more necessary, but like you mentioned, more valuable to the utility. And those ways that you can leverage that backup power, they're going to become more and more lucrative as things do progressively get worse.
Yeah, I'd say in the PJM region specifically, it's maybe been in a bit of a comfortable lull for some years now. Like I said, they hit peak, all-time peak was almost 20 years ago. That's quite a while. You get population and economic growth, and to have your peak that long ago. Now, given there's been advancements in the efficiency with light bulbs and all those other things too, so it
Yeah.
is yeah, it's definitely a lot of moving pieces here, but it's all to say that, yeah, this price is a blowout, but it is indicative of the need. And the need is going to be a lot. Building power plants costs billions of dollars. You want to put advanced emissions equipment on them, billions more. It's just how it's the direction that we're headed, and it's something people need to be aware of.
Yeah. Any last thoughts on the impact to customers or best ways to leverage it? I think we've kind of hit a good high level.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's high level, right? This is a component of your bill that many people are unaware of, because often it's even sort of hidden in the bill, right? If you ever want to you want to be asleep in 2 minutes, go pull a tariff for your local, wherever your utility is, and start to read through some of these things, and you'll get an idea of all the moving pieces that come into play here. Um, it's complicated, to say the least, in a lot of ways. Definitely reach out to professional. Um, Whether you see this on your bill or not, I assure you, you're paying it. The grid needs it. We need the supply. We need that for to meet future demand. And reach out to professional, because, like I said, in this case, this is actually avoidable. The cost of energy, believe it or not, has actually come down because the price of natural gas has come down significantly. If you go back a couple of years, when the Ukraine war first broke out, The price of liquefied natural gas really spiked, which spiked just demand domestically too, because that's getting exported over to Europe and Asia and everywhere else. It 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 really drove prices high, which in turn made the cost of electricity high. Well, a lot of that has come down, and a lot of people are going to go to get their next energy contract, and they'll be like, "Well, how come this is the same or higher?" Well, it's this stuff like capacity. So it really helps to understand your bill and to know that things like you can't avoid necessarily paying for electricity. I mean, you're going to need to use the electricity right now. You could self-generate, like we provide that resource as well. But nonetheless, this is something that the grid really needs, and we can help manage that cost and, like I said, avoid it in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Well, Barry, thanks for sharing your insights. And I know this is going to be a developing, story, if you will. And to the audience, again, if you would like some, deeper dive information on the impacts that this could have on your business, or just help understanding, what you are paying for, how you're structured today, and then changes that might protect you from those increases, just reach out to us. Our website, exergenergy.com. We've got a easy to use contact page there. Give us a little bit of information so we can reach you. One of our consultants will reach out and just, give you a good view of the best way to protect your business. So Barry, thanks again for the time, and we look forward to talking to you more in the future.
My pleasure. Thanks, Randall.
Thanks.